The sun rose slowly over Mark's sprawling farm, casting golden light across the fields. Chickens clucked in the coop, the barn door creaked open, and the smell of fresh hay filled the air. To outsiders, Mark looked like a simple farmer, a man who tilled soil, cared for animals, and enjoyed a quiet life away from chaos. But beneath the calm exterior, he carried a secret past that no one in the neighborhood knew. The HOA, however, saw him differently. To Karen, the notorious HOA president, Mark's farm was unused space ripe for progress. Late one night, while Mark sat on his porch sipping black coffee, he heard something unusual. The low growl of engines. Headlights cut through the darkness, bouncing across his crops. He frowned as the rumbling grew louder. By morning, he found tracks carved deep into the soil near his property line. Wooden stakes with orange flags stood like silent invaders among his crops. Mark knelt down, touched the soil, and his jaw tightened. Someone was trespassing. The very next afternoon, Karen marched onto Mark's porch. Clipboard in hand, hair perfectly styled, and voice dripping with arrogance. "Mark," she announced, "your farmland is perfect for our new project. We're building a private runway for the HOA community. You should feel honored." Mark's brow furrowed. "This is my land." "You have no right," Karen smirked, tapping her clipboard. "We've already voted. The trucks are coming in. Consider this progress." Mark didn't answer. He just stared at her in silence, his eyes unblinking, unsettling her more than any argument could. The next morning, the farm erupted with noise. Bulldozers rolled in, knocking over fences. Trucks dumped gravel onto the soil where crops once grew. Dust filled the air as heavy machinery tore into the earth. Mark's cows scattered, spooked by the chaos. The barn rattled with every thundering engine. Neighbors watched from a distance, whispering in disbelief. They knew Karen was pushy, but this, building a runway through a farmer's land, was madness. Mark stood silently by his fence, recording every detail on his phone. His stillness was almost eerie. Inside his farmhouse, the air smelled faintly of leather and paper. On his desk lay property deeds, government permits, and photos of the destruction. Each night, Mark carefully organized files into a thick black folder. He never yelled, never argued. He let Karen dig her own hole. His neighbors wondered why he wasn't fighting harder. But Mark knew. Sometimes silence was the sharpest weapon. One windy afternoon, a roar shattered the skies. Mark stepped outside to see a private jet descending. The plane's wheels screeched against the unfinished runway, throwing dust and hay into the air. The barn shook, windows rattled, animals panicked. On the sidelines, Karen stood with the HOA board, clapping like they had just opened an amusement park. "It's beautiful," she cheered. Mark only smirked. "You have no idea what you've just done," he whispered to himself. Karen strutted to Mark's porch the next day, more confident than ever. "See? The runway works perfectly. Property values are going to skyrocket. You should be thanking me." Mark leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold. "Funny. I was about to say the same thing, about shutting it all down." Karen scoffed, laughing loudly. To her, Mark was nothing more than a stubborn farmer with no real power. But the way he spoke, calm, measured, almost too confident, left a small seed of unease in her mind. The final straw came when another jet came in too low, its wing nearly scraping the roof of Mark's barn. The blast of wind sent hay flying and spooked his livestock into a frenzy. Mark clenched his jaw, then turned back inside his farmhouse. From a drawer, he pulled out a sleek black briefcase. Inside lay neatly filed documents and, resting on top, a badge gleaming under the lamp's light. Director, Federal Aviation Administration. Mark closed the case with a snap. "Time to end this." 3 mornings later, the quiet neighborhood was interrupted by the arrival of black SUVs with tinted windows. They rolled onto the HOA's streets in perfect formation. Men and women in dark suits stepped out, their mirrored sunglasses scanning the half-finished runway. Neighbors gathered on porches, murmuring nervously. Karen stormed forward, waving her clipboard like a weapon. "This is private property. You can't be here!" The lead agent calmly lifted a badge. Federal Aviation Administration. The crowd fell silent. The agents spread out across the construction site like hawks. They measured the gravel, photographed the soil, examined the flimsy permits taped to the HOA clubhouse door. Every note scribbled down was another nail in the HOA's coffin. Unsafe construction, zero federal clearance encroachment on private farmland. Karen's confident smile began to crack. Still, she barked orders at workers, shouting, "Ignore them! Keep building!" But the sight of federal jackets was enough. Machines powered down, engines silenced. Finally, the lead agent approached Karen. "Ma'am, do you have FAA authorization to construct a runway?" Karen puffed up her chest and handed over her beloved HOA binder. "Here, everything you need is in here." The agent flipped through pages of neighborhood rules about lawn height and mailbox paint. He raised an eyebrow, then laughed. "This isn't federal clearance. This is a rule book for backyard fences." The neighbors snickered. Karen's face turned crimson. The crowd shifted as Mark stepped forward for the first time. Calm, collected, he pulled a slim wallet from his coat and flipped it open. The gold badge inside gleamed in the sunlight. "Director, Federal Aviation Administration," he announced. A stunned silence swept the field. Even the agents paused to nod respectfully at him. Karen's mouth fell open, her clipboard slipping from her hands. You, she stammered. "You're just a farmer." Mark's eyes were like steel. "No, I'm the man who decides where planes fly." "And they're not flying here." Mark turned to the agents with a single command. "Shut it down!" Every inch, within minutes, the site was swarming. Bulldozers were impounded. Construction equipment was tagged and hauled away. Freshly poured gravel was dug up and removed. Karen tried to protest, chasing after an agent. "You can't do this! This is my community project!" The agent didn't even glance at her. "Ma'am, this was never legal." "And thanks to the director, it ends today." At the next HOA meeting, chaos erupted. Furious residents demanded answers. "You lied to us, Karen," shouted one man. "You charged us fees for an airstrip that doesn't exist," cried another. The board, red-faced and ashamed, voted unanimously to remove Karen as president. Her once loyal supporters turned their backs. Karen stormed out of the clubhouse without a word, her empire of control crumbling to dust. Weeks later, Mark's fields were green again. The soil had healed, the animals grazed in peace, and the loud engines were gone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mark sat on his porch with a glass of iced tea. The distant sound of crickets filled the air. His wife stepped out smiling. "It's quiet again," Mark nodded, watching the golden light fade across his land. "That's how it should be." This farm was meant for peace, not planes. And with that, he leaned back in his chair, knowing the HOA would never dare cross him again.